Three-row SUVs are marketed as the ultimate family vehicle. They can go anywhere, tow anything, haul anything, and carry anyone. Just check out the commercials and you'll see lots of kids in child seats. So it's always surprised me that the best-selling three-row SUVs in America aren't actually very child seat friendly. But an option that certainly is this 2024 Volkswagen Atlas. Let's talk about why. If you didn't already know it, the Atlas is big and it's boxy. It's just under 201 inches long, meaning it is notably longer than something like a regular Highlander, although it is a little bit easier to park than the new Grand Highlander. The boxiness, though, is probably the bigger benefit, because that gives us a really large and practical cargo area and among the best second row and third row headroom figures available in a three-row SUV. If you want something bigger and boxier in the back than the Atlas, you're really looking at a much more expensive full-size SUV. But the pièce de résistance for the Atlas really is the second row functionality, not just the roominess, but the way that second row actually works. So clearly we need to talk about that next. Volkswagen offers two different seating configurations. You can get this with either a three-person bench in the middle or with the captain's chairs that this model has. You can see we have an inboard armrest for this particular seat. But regardless of the seating configuration, the third row is always only going to seat two people. There is no 8-seat version of the Atlas. It's either 6 or 7 seats depending on the trim level you get. I've always thought the missing 8th seat was a bit of a disadvantage for this vehicle because you will find an 8th seat in something like a Highlander, even though it is smaller on the inside. I do like the added convenience of that really tiny center seat in the way back. But again, it's about this second row seat design. If I were, for instance, to latch a child seat into place, even a child seat base like this rear-facing infant seat base, you can tilt and slide the seat forward because of the way this second row seat moves. And this applies to the bench as well as the captain's chairs on both sides of the vehicle. You'll notice that when I pull this handle, the seat bottom and the seat back cushion stay in alignment with one another. The entire seat just tilts and slides forward like that to allow easier access into the third row. And if you've ever had child seats in the second row and you need to use the third row, you know that sometimes it can be a bit of a song and dance, especially if you have a bench seat in the middle because say you want the extra room, or you might want to space out the kids a bit, or you want to sit back there with them. Whatever the reason that you might want to have 3 people occupy the second row, getting those extra 2 people into the back can be pretty tricky. Now this feature is not unique to the Atlas. You will find something very similar in the new Traverse, the new Acadia, the Grand Cherokee L, the Pacifica, just to name a few. But oddly enough, not in the Ford Explorer or the Highlander or the Grand Highlander or the Pilot or the Telluride or the Palisade, etc., etc., etc. On the best-selling list, a solid 8 out of 10 of the best-selling three-row SUVs in America don't offer this kind of functionality. And I've always thought that was an odd pity. Now there are a few things to know. Obviously, the child seat or the base has to be latch anchored into place. This is not going to work if you have the shoulder belt there, but it is going to work regardless of the position of this seat. So if you have a forward-facing seat and the seat angle needs to change for whatever reason for the installation of that forward-facing seat, it's still going to function regardless of that seat back angle. Now, if you're using a base like this that has the extendable foot, this is a Kleck base and it does have the anti-rebound foot right there, then obviously if that's deployed, it's not going to function. But the typical anti-rebound bars that press against the seat back, it is still going to work. Obviously not when the child seat's latched anchored into place, but with the base here, it's going to work just fine. With that foot, obviously it's going to be a bit of a problem because of the changing angle if that was adjusted properly. What about rear-facing convertible seats? Well, this is really just going to be a bummer for everybody for a while because it's not going to help in this situation. You can still slide the second row seat forward and backward, but it's not really going to give you extra space in the rear. Obviously, there are limitations to this feature. If you have a big convertible seat like this enormous Kiko seat right here in the rear-facing position, you're not really going to be able to move the seat and easily access the third row. It's going to have to be done from the other side or through the middle. If you have 2 kids rear-facing like this, yes, it is still going to be a problem. But when they finally go forward-facing, or at least one of them goes forward-facing, then things are going to be considerably easier because if we pop this in this forward-facing position, obviously it's not latch anchored down, but you can see that it will still tilt and slide forward and allow you significantly easier access to the third row. Even with this extra large Kiko child seat that's rated for kids up to 65 pounds, you can see that getting in and out of the third row is going to be very, very easy. One little caveat, however, with that statement. You do have to again keep the child seat latch anchored into place, and that means that after your child hits about 40 pounds or so, you're going to have to start using the shoulder belt. So there are going to be windows where this is going to be extraordinarily useful and windows where it's not going to be any more useful than the average 3-row SUV. But there's still going to be large portions of time where third row access is going to be significantly better. Speaking of latch anchors, let's go ahead and take a look at those now. You can see that in the second row we have outboard latch anchors right there, and they're hidden behind this little fold in the fabric. They are kind of deep inside. That means that reaching through there with some of these newer clips, that's going to be pretty easy right like that, but some of those older attachment mechanisms, that could be a bit more of a pain. We also have top tether anchors, of course, for the second row seating positions here, and no latch anchors back there in the third row. We do have top tethers, but no latch anchors for child seats back there in the way back. If you're a taller family, you're definitely going to want to take a look at the Atlas over something like a Volkswagen Tiguan. That's relatively roomy in its category, but with this front seat adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, not only do I have plenty of headroom in the first row and in the second row, lots of legroom, but I also have a lot of clearance between this infant seat and this front seat. It means that I could move this 2 to 3 inches further rearward and have room for a 6'4" or 6'5" driver to sit comfortably and normally behind a rear-facing child seat or an infant seat, something that you just could not do in most 2-row vehicles, especially something like a RAV4 or CR-V, some of those smaller options. So if you're a family of taller people and you have kids in rear-facing seats, you definitely want to take a look in this direction. One advantage to not having a third seat in the third row is that the seats that are there are a little bit wider. And that means that wider child seats, like again this Kiko seat, they're not going to interfere with the buckles, they're going to be easier to install, and they're certainly going to give the child a little bit more room in the back. Then we have what I would describe as just the general roominess of the Atlas. This front seat's comfortably adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. With this seat all the way back in its tracks, you can see I still have maybe about 6 inches of legroom left. I could very easily move this seat a bit further forward to give that third row passenger a bit more room. I should mention that the Atlas has 113 inches of combined legroom. That theoretically puts this a little behind the Telluride and the Palisade, but not every manufacturer measures legroom in the same way. So I would say in reality, this is actually pretty close to the Telluride and Palisade as far as the combined legroom figure goes. It does feel a little bit less roomy than the Grand Highlander, but we have that improved practicality. In the Grand Highlander and in the Pilot, all you can do to get into the back is slide this second row forward, pardon me here, and then you have to try and crawl through this little space, this little gap right back here. It was doable for me in the Grand Highlander. It was a real squeeze in the Pilot. If you're much larger than I am, you have no hope of really getting back there into the third row. Speaking of the third row, it's time to check it out now. Getting back here, again, really easy because of the way that seat moves. We have these huge headrests that pop out of the back there, and then I can reach all the way forward and pull this second row seat back into place. I have a little bit of red webbing here that can also tilt and slide the seat forward in a different way for even greater access to the third row, or I can pull it right back like that. With this seat all the way back in its tracks, you can see I have about 3/4 of an inch of legroom left. So even if everybody in the front wants to stretch out, you still have enough room in the back for a 6-foot tall person. The seat bottom cushion is not slammed all the way to the ground as it is in many SUVs. This is a little bit higher up. It's not the highest, it's not minivan-like, but relatively comfortable. You can see I have some leg support there and lots of headroom. The back of my head does start touching this hinge area for the hatchback there, but above my head, I have about 1.5 inches of headroom. So if you're sitting in a more natural position where your head is not back there on the head restraint, just naturally sitting up, you have effectively 1.5 inches of headroom left. And again, because we don't have a third seat, the seat itself is more comfortable than the third row in some of those 3-seat options, especially if you're sitting next to a bigger child seat like this one. Some other nice touches back here include air vents on the side here, so you can very easily direct air towards your face or towards your torso. Also, it'll help keep kids a little bit cooler in the back, or pets if you have the third row folded. We also have some USB-C charge ports, but lots of hard plastics back here. Since a lot of folks do keep the third row folded most of the time, then it really ends up being an expanded cargo area. The plastics back here certainly have durability in mind. Be sure and let me know what you think about all that down there, and of course check out our full review of the Volkswagen Atlas coming up soon. Let me know what you think about this second row seat design. This is again something not unique to the Atlas, but definitely unique if we're talking about some of the best-selling three-row SUVs in the US. Not too many SUVs offer this functionality, and I think that's really a pity. Also surprising, there is only one minivan in America that offers this particular feature. You won't find it in the bulk of the options in even that kind of family-focused vehicle, and it really does help improve practicality. If you would rather just tilt the seat forward, you can pull the bit of webbing or the recline lever and just tilt it forward. But as far as access to this seat goes, it is basically, if I can pull this back up, going to be just that tilt and slide mechanism forward. For the ultimate combination of family and cargo practicality, you're still going to want a minivan. But the cargo area is very practical for a three-row SUV in this segment. We have just under 21 cubic feet of storage space, which means you can barely put 22-inch roller bags in this position and still close the hatch. And you could put about 4 or 5 of them back here, depending on how wide they are. There's also some extra underfloor storage, so you could also put some of those larger 24-inch roller bags back here without folding the third row seat. I was able to fit 3 24-inch roller bags back here, which is definitely a good showing. And there's a spare tire under the floor, so that way you aren't stranded if you are traveling out there with your family. To give you an idea of how deep that cargo well is, you can see that maybe about half of that roller bag can fit there under the floor, and you can remove the floor if you want access to all of that storage and just leave it at home. This is significantly more cargo capacity than you'll find in a Toyota Highlander, but it's pretty similar to the Telluride and the Palisade, and it looks like the new Acadia and Traverse are probably going to give us maybe 25 cubic feet of cargo capacity. We don't have exact numbers for them just yet, but those cargo areas do appear even bigger than the one in the Atlas. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you want to support this channel, you can either join as a member, you can hit that subscribe button, the like button, turn on notifications if you haven't already done so, and of course, find us over at Facebook. We do an awful lot of social media content over there, including talking about child seats in vehicles like this Volkswagen Atlas, complete reviews, and other topics that are current. News, reports, rumors, etc. All of that's going on Facebook, so please follow us over there, and I'll see all of you next week.